Good morning, afternoon, and evening, whenever you're listening to this. We're coming at you for the astrology of May 2nd. This is Conscious Embodiment with Dr. Michael Lennox. I'm Zoe, your producer, and we do have Dr. Michael here, of course. Michael, aren't we moving into a rougher month?
Yeah, I was thinking this morning before we met up to record today, Zoe, if I could remember without looking what some of the later months of the year are going to feel like in terms of like the
Hmm.
timbre of, April was the easiest month. And that was accurate. And I think it's safe to say that May is the most bumpy month of the year.
Whoa, the most.
Well, listen, we're already in the eclipse wormhole, right? In fact,
That's true.
we're 2 days into an eclipse wormhole, which amplifies everything energetically. This is the next Mercury retrograde month, so we're already in his pre-shadows. We'll talk a little bit about that today. And one of the things I've been trying to think about articulating for people is I do believe that there's something to 2022 that we're not moving through these big planetary aspects that we generally are accustomed to.
Hmm.
For example, the big square last year from Saturn to Uranus, all of the 2020 energy of Saturn, Uranus, and Jupiter coming together by conjunction. And I've talked a lot about this as we've moved into this year. And here's the latest sense I have of it. If you think of transits as just sound or noise or vibration that we have to deal with, if there are big waves of energy from the social and outer planets that we have to work with, that grabs a lot of our energetic attention. But if there aren't those bigger outward distracting energies from large transiting planetary waves, then all of the little personal planet movement that we go through is bigger, louder, deeper, because it's all we're grappling with.
Yeah.
Right. So, like when Venus went retrograde in the first months of the year, man, oh man, that was so difficult emotionally and energetically for people. And I think part of why, at least through the lens of understanding energy through astrology, is that because there weren't louder noises distracting us from the Venus movement, that Venus stuff took us to a much more powerful place of change and transformation inside of us.
That makes sense.
Right? Right. So it's just
Yeah,
like, what are you focusing on if you're not being distracted by this and that from the outside world in a big
exactly.
energetic way? Your inner landscape is going to be much more gripping.
Mhm.
Right.
Right.
So an eclipse wormhole will be more wormholey because like less outside distractions. This Mercury retrograde this month, I think, is going to be bumpy because there's less to distract us energetically. Let's break some of this stuff down and talk about the week ahead and some of the things we can expect as May unfolds. In terms of thinking about like this week, understand we're 2 days out from a new moon that was also an eclipse that kicks off wormhole energy. While it technically, we could say the new moon is behind us and we're no longer in that intention setting piece of the new moon, we are absolutely in a wave of faster moving energy because we're 2 days out of a new moon that's also an eclipse. But one of the things that's absolutely going to make the week sort of extra fiery in energy is that today is the day that Venus changes signs. This is a big deal because Venus has been in her exalted place of Pisces for the last 3.5 weeks. And her participation in the eclipse this past weekend was like love on crack
Mhm.
because you had Jupiter and Neptune and Pisces, and Venus all in Pisces. And Venus ruled the new moon because of the sign of Taurus is one of Venus's ruling planets. So as we were coming out of April and into eclipse season, our heart centers were as connected to love as they possibly can be. And then in one little fell swoop, Venus leaves her exalted sign of Pisces and today dives into Aries, fire sign, Mars's ruling sign, a very masculine energy, and the place of what's called her detriment. Any planet in the sign that is opposite that planet's natural ruler is called that planet's detriment. So in this case, we're talking about Venus as one of the signs that she rules is Libra. Aries is the sign opposite Libra. So it's that placement that makes Venus in Mars considered to be in her detriment or not operating, at her best. But I think it's much easier to understand this archetypally. And the archetype in question here is that Venus, the planet of love, inside the mansion of fire and movement, she's just not happy there. She can't be graceful and loving when she's in someone's house that she's not comfortable in, right? So she's in a house of fire. So for the next 3.5 weeks, our emotional body is going to be a little bit more reactive. We're going to be closer to anger than we are to forgiveness.
Oh, man.
And it's one of the little subtle ways the month of May promises to be a little bit bumpier is that how Venus goes, so goes our emotional state. And so in a month where we're in an eclipse wormhole, Mercury's getting ready to turn around. And then when he does, he'll spend most of his retrograde in Gemini, which is one of his signs, which means it's going to be a really challenging Mercury retrograde to have Venus in a place that she's not comfortable and also not able to deliver us quickly to love, compassion, and forgiveness. I think that adds an element of challenge to the month. So do understand that as of today, and it'll take a day or two to acclimate to this change, and some of the more sensitive of you will feel this, that when we wake up tomorrow on Tuesday, it'll be a very different landscape for all of our emotional bodies for pretty much the rest of the month. I'll say this so that we don't leave you with the idea that Venus in Aries is bad, air quotes, because there's no such thing. It's just a different quality that isn't necessarily smooth when it comes to how we relate to things like love, right? So where Venus is also gives us a little bit of a clue of what's the universal love language for these couple of months.
Okay.
Venus in your natal chart speaks to your love language. How you express love is a function of your Venus sign.
You know what I just remembered? My Venus is in Aries, and that's the only thing I know besides my big three.
Oh, how funny. I can't believe that. I didn't know this about you, and here I am about to talk about it.
Yeah.
So let me ask you a question. Let's test this out. Would you say that one of your love languages is doing things of a loving nature for others or being done for you?
Oh my God, absolutely. Yeah, I'm very let me cook for you, let me hold something. Do you need help?
But do you see? The archetype of Aries is all about action. Mars' sign. It says, let me do something for you.
Yeah.
My Venus is in Leo. So my love language is all about generosity and affection.
Mm-hmm.
If you give me a little bit of attention, because that's what I need as a Leo sun and a Leo Venus, I need
Right.
some attention. I will give you my checkbook. Because my love language is generosity and affection. Your love language is action, doing.
Yes.
So while each person has a chart and you each have a Venus placement, and this doesn't apply in the same, literal individual way that we're talking about, you and I, but in a general sort of way that love is in the air wants action this month. So when in doubt, take some action to show what your love button is indicating might be up for you. And who knows, you might land something interesting in your intimate spaces. Just a little quick reminder that we are, in fact, in a Mercury retrograde cycle. He doesn't turn around till next week on May 10th, but he is in that pre-shadow, that section before he turns around when he's traveling over all the territory he's going to visit again when he is, in fact, moving backwards. So this began on April 26th. So the dates that are interesting to be paying attention to your communication, especially in the area of communication breakdowns or challenges or delays or anything that is in the realm of challenge or problem from the neck up. If it rose up between April 26th and next week on May 10th, it will likely come back during Mercury's backward motion. The way to get through the bumpiness of Mercury appearing to move backwards is to be well prepared.
Okay.
So forewarned is forearmed. This week has Mercury moving through his shadow, right? So the whole week puts you on notice. If anything comes up that feels like a glitch in your thinking or your communicating or your negotiating, it's going to come up again in the second part of May. So that's the sort of the message of this week with regard to your Mercury consciousness is keep paying attention. Things come up. You're going to be revisiting them. The big energy of this week hits right on hump day. And it won't be humpy, although it might be humpy. It just won't be heavy in that way that the middle of the week is often, thought of as the dregs of the week. You've got Sun and Uranus coming together on Wednesday. That's conscious awareness. All solar transits are about what are we becoming more aware of? What are we noticing? What are we seeing? And what are we integrating as actual awareness? And Uranus, the great awakener, the unexpected wild card energy where anything can happen and probably will. And so when these two bodies come together once a year, we are aware of the sort of process of waking up to higher levels of consciousness, or more importantly, for you using this podcast to sort of navigate the week ahead, you may be made aware very suddenly this week of stuff you need to know to function at a higher level of consciousness. It's a guarantee of reversals or pivots or unexpected shifts to come as part of moving through this week. So it's just a big jolty energy that will, I think, be felt more acutely by us because Venus is now in Aries, and because Venus reflects our emotional body, and our emotional body's on fire a little bit and more reactive and more prone to reactivity and aggressiveness when emotionally triggered. This coming together of Sun and Uranus as a big wild card energy could make the week a little bit dicey. Just move slow enough so that if something unexpected comes along, you're not as kicked to the curb as you might be if you really weren't sort of paying attention for the possibility of something to come at you fast. One of my favorite esoteric points in astrology is Black Moon Lilith. And if you know anything about my work outside of astrology in terms of consciousness awareness, the reason I love Black Moon Lilith so much is it's a point that's all about shadow, what's sort of hidden just below the surface of the consciousness of us that we trip on and then learn something because we've marinated for a moment in something we had hoped to keep repressed or shoved out into our unconscious or hidden, but pops up and we have no choice but to deal with it.
You talk about this in your Diving into the Shadow class,
All
right?
the time, because here, let me explain Black Moon technically, because I think everyone will get this immediately.
Okay.
The moon is our connection to the unconscious. And the anthropomorphized notion would be that the moon says to us, hey, I know you think you're all that, Mr. Sun, shining his light that I'm reflecting back at y'all.
Mm.
But I am in charge of the unconscious. And that's as big as all of outer space. And truly, in the way that the solar system reflects our humanity, our conscious awareness is all we have. Like all we have is the light of our lives saying, I am, and I know that I am. And that's what the sun is doing. The sun is up there burning brightly saying, I am, and I know that I am. But the unconscious of us is the much, much, much bigger realm. I'm speaking specifically through the lens of psychology, right?
Mm-hmm.
That we have a conscious awareness and an unconscious mind, and the unconscious is much vaster.
So is that Black Moon Lilith?
Well, no, this is the moon as the one who's in charge of the unconscious.
Okay.
And think about this, that the unconscious from the moon's perspective is behind her.
Okay.
Outer space is behind her, right?
Yes,
We're on Earth, we look up there, and behind the moon is the rest of outer space.
Right.
So the moon's relationship to the unconscious is, she says to us, I own this realm. It's behind me, and it's all of outer space.
Got it.
Black Moon is inside of the moon's orbit, not outside of it. So it's still about the moon's orbit. So therefore, it's still about our unconscious, but not the vast, deep unconscious behind her, but what's right inside of her orbit. And therefore, what's the stuff that's in the unconscious, but guaranteed to bubble up out of it that we trip on?
Okay.
Hence the shadow work, right? If I look at you and I hate you because of something you're doing, I could imagine that that's about you, but shadow work tells us it's not. It's about me. It's
Right.
about something in my unconscious that's being triggered by your behavior. And if I'm moving through life as a good steward of my unconscious world and my conscious awareness, when I'm triggered by you being your big old asshole, I'm going to look in the mirror and say, all right, what is this about me that's rising up out of my unconscious? What rage, what sadness, what grief, what disconnect is coming up out of my unconscious?
Right.
You know, in sessions, I always used to use this joke, which I always thought was paltry, but people seem to get it. Black Moon Lilith is like you're sitting at dinner and you think you're going to say, pass the salt, but you accidentally say, you ruined my life. But the description is only apt if you understand that you didn't expect to say.
Got it. Okay.
You really expected to say, pass the salt.
Right. Okay.
That's Black Moon in action. And what it is technically is that the moon and the earth pull on each other. There's an apogee, meaning far away, closer to.
Mm-hmm.
There's a wobble. It's not
Okay.
a perfect circle of the moon around the earth. They pull
Yeah.
on each other. And you can take a mean or an average of that inner wobble, and that's Black Moon Lilith.
Okay.
And that point has a fixed sort of relativity to us that causes it to move slowly across the ecliptic in 9-month cycles. And when Black Moon Lilith changes signs, as she recently did, how we relate to our shadow work changes. Now, here's where I have to talk about Lilith for a moment. Lilith was in the Canaanite origin myth, the first woman created in equal stead with Adam, made from clay, Adam and Lilith.
Pre-Eve.
Simultaneous to Eve, the
Oh, okay.
Israelites had an origin story. Listen, I'm no historian. I could be wrong about this. This is what I've gleaned by being curious about this over the years.
Uh-huh.
But this is, I would say, while I'm no historian, this is loosely based on history.
Okay.
The Israelites had Adam and Eve, the subservient female version made from Adam's rib. The Canaanites had a goddess worshiping society. And so their original woman was a strong sovereign female created in equal stead with Adam. What happened around 800 BC is when the Jews were exiled to Babylon and codified the Old Testament that we know today. That's when those bunch of old men said, oh, let's get rid of that Lilith chick. She is way too powerful. And let's favor the Eve story because that'll help us control and subjugate women.
Right.
One of the things that's true about Lilith as an archetype is she absolutely engages us around our sexuality. And part of that comes from this sovereign notion of Eve as a fully formed woman, just as sexual as her counterpart. So it's kind of like Lilith wants to be on top every once in a while, so the patriarchy got rid of her. And then they cast her as a sexual deviant.
Right.
So the patriarchy would say that Lilith is a demon.
Yes.
That she eats children, that she's overly sexualized. Well, we know that ain't true. And we know that is an artifact of the patriarchy that we are actively seeking to transmute. Somehow Lilith got added to Black Moon in Western astrology, and I don't know why, but I'm all for it. Because one of the things that we often struggle with in our shadow work is being okay with our sexual nature.
Right.
How much sexual shame has driven part of the problems that exist just even in religiosity on this planet that has so many other, implications, starts with human beings are ashamed of their sexuality if it's not presented to them in a manner that can allow us to engage with that part of our nature in a beautiful way. And so shadow work is also designed to help us reconcile the shame and the difficulty we have of everything that's shadowy and hidden, including our sexual desires. It was interesting to me that while we were struggling with so much polarization just on the planets, that's gotten so much more intense since the pandemic rolled in early 2021, while we were still really gripped with that stuff of two sides rising up everywhere, Black Moon Lilith was in Gemini, the inventor of there are two sides, right?
Wow.
So on April 15th, Black Moon Lilith left Gemini and entered Cancer. So this has a couple of things that's interesting to us. For one thing, at an individual level, when it comes to thinking about doing shadow work and diving in to the spaces that are hidden in your psyche that need some attention, Black Moon Lilith puts us in a kind of darker place. There's a lot of emotional secrecy and darkness associated with the Cancer archetype. All of that hiddenness and protection through vulnerability also allows for the shadow of hiding the shames that we, are grappling with. Certainly Cancer as the archetype that connects to mothers and mothering puts your matriarchal lineage in mind over the next 9 months in terms of some of the healing that's required of us. Cancer is also the archetype where we are asked to be more comfortable with vulnerability. Vulnerability is something that would help us squash off the things we don't want ourselves to know about or others to know about, the things we wish to keep hidden. So when we're more vulnerable about aspects of ourselves, we're more likely to shove those aspects of self into hidden places. And Black Moon Lilith in Cancer is not gonna allow for much hiding, because we're gonna be sitting at dinner thinking we're about to say pass the salt, and we're gonna wind up saying, "Why'd you ruin my life?" So for the rest of the year, as Black Moon Lilith transits Cancer, because it's a 9-month transit, and she'll be there until the very beginning of next year. And understand that your demands to self explore, to look below the surface. And if you're listening to this podcast, you're probably more likely to be someone who's okay with shadow work and looking in the mirror and diving into unconscious spaces to see what wants to be healed. We have a tremendous opportunity to heal family wounds and traumas that we move around in, that really are just things that were handed to us through our ancestral line. So much of what we struggle with are patterns of interaction between our emotions, our thoughts, and getting our needs met that we were taught. We were taught by our parents because they were taught by theirs, and so on and so on and so on. And Cancer is the archetype that understands this connection from generation to generation to generation. And so when it's the generational shadow that we're talking about, the demand to heal your inner wounds are going to be best done for the rest of the year as a function of looking into your family history and the things you are because of how you were raised. So check in with us next week, kids. You don't want to miss an episode this month, because it really is going to be a wacky month, and each week is going to get slightly more difficult. Next week, Jupiter changes signs, and that's going to bring another fiery sense of energy. We got another eclipse next week. Tune in next week, kids, because May is going to be intense, but I will do my best to carry us all through it. Have at it.
All right, it's dream segment time. Every week, Dr. Michael will interpret dreams that are sent in via email or take a live caller. If you would like your dream interpreted on the podcast, you can go ahead and email us at dreams@michaellennox.com. Hopefully your dream will make it onto the show. All right, our dream today is emailed in by Kaylin. She says, the dream took place in a large backyard and began with me looking at a tall cart of dying potted plants. I felt guilt that I had not watered the plants and allowed them to die. My partner called from the back door and told me that they were completely dead and not to worry about trying to water them. I felt so bad and decided to try anyways, and got a ladder out to water them. Upon reaching the top, I was surprised to see that the plants, which were all carnivorous, were healthy and still holding on to life. I watered them and felt bad that I had almost given up on them when they were still alive. As I got down from the ladder, a family of 3 large foxes approached me at a fast pace. I felt uneasy about how fast the foxes were approaching me and how they were invading my personal space. They told me they had not eaten in a long time and were starving, and I started to feel sorry for them and wanted to help, even though I was distrustful of them. I asked my partner in the house to cook them some food, and he made many plates of fancy, expensive food for me to give them. They each were not enthusiastic about it and spent the whole time complaining before giving a dry thanks and leaving. I felt sad and used that I gave our resources to the ungrateful foxes.
One of the things I'm experiencing and taking in this dream is that I have a theoretical orientation about any dream that includes animal medicine
Mhm.
as ultimately for us. And, like that the foxes, no matter what the dream tells us, the fox medicine is in this dream as medicine.
Mhm.
Right. So let's start with that for a moment. Fox medicine. In fact, I had to look this up and I looked at my own book, my dream dictionary, just to remind me. Foxes are about, first of all, they're a clever animal, right? So they're very
Right.
much about cleverness, but they are a trickster animal. They're considered a trickster archetype, partly because they're sort of clever and trickstery. And in human spaces, foxes are very good at getting like what they want from humans, like eggs out of chicken coops and, things like that. So you've got cunning and cleverness, but trickster cunning and cleverness as an energy. Interestingly, she's not feeding the foxes and she's not watering the plants. So let's inch our way into this interpretation, sort of going like image by image. First of all, when we're in the backyard in a dream, we're in consideration of self, because houses are always about self, but yards are not about the self. They're about the immediate environment around the house, right? So the front of a house is about what you present to the world, what people can see with regard to who you are.
Mhm.
The backyard is more private. You got to be invited to the cookout to be in the backyard, right? It's not someplace you naturally are or that it's a part of self in one's environment, but that is either a little hidden or behind the scenes. This dream is definitely about what is Kaylin nurturing
Yeah.
or not.
I would dare say, how does she feel about it too?
Golly, this is a dream where I kind of wish she was here live. So I can ask lots of questions. The partner is in this dream in big ways, right? So I can't speak into that without Kaylin here to ask, but I'll put it out there for listeners and for Kaylin if she's listening. The fact that your partner is there and part of this does mean that what she's in consideration about, where are her resources going? What is she nurturing and caring for? And what is she not? And how does she feel about that? Does have something to do with her negotiations with her partner.
Mhm.
He calls from the back door. That's an image that suggests how they connect, how they speak, how they interact, how they negotiate. Right? You getting that? Like he's calling her. So
Yeah.
what's the symbolic meaning of that then represents this is the way they communicate about stuff. He's calling her from the back door with an opinion
Right.
that they're completely dead, don't bother.
Like kind of advice.
Right. But is it accurate? Is it right?
No.
No. Right. Out of her sense of doing what's right, I'm going to guess, she goes to nurture something that she had forgotten about, which I think is good. She has to get a ladder to do so, which means she's got to go kind of precariously to another level of her conscious awareness, higher up.
Mm.
So if the partner consciousness is on ground level at the back door, sort of giving advice that isn't accurate, if she goes just a little bit out of that space and above it, which she has to do precariously because it's a ladder, she sees more truly what's accurate. One is that these are carnivorous plants, whatever that's going to mean. There's something I go with carnivorous plants that this message of caring for self is even deeper, that, carnivorous plants eat meat. And if I go with meat as like hearty nutrition, there's something about self care that she's been ignoring that might relate to stuff with regard to how she relates to her partner.
I was about to say that the partner can't see.
That's right. So Kaylin can see when she gets a little
Mm.
bit above the partnership consciousness, she can see that in fact there's a ravenousness here. The plants are carnivorous and they ain't dead. They need a water and they need attention. So then we get this whole thing with the foxes where there's an invasion of space, right? So this medicine, the cleverness or the cunning that the foxes are representing isn't working for Kaylin for some reason. I think we're drawing a line between the partner presence and what we've already sort of unpacked with the dream. But again, Kaylin's not here. So I don't want to present this as this is what Kaylin dreams mean. I want to present this is what I'm vibing based on the tiny bits of information that the craftiness, cunning, and cleverness of the foxes is also something she's not feeding. They're starving. They, oh my God, poor Kaylin and her partner.
I'm like, oh, we're kind of digging into partner here.
We are. And so I want to say I'm sensitive to this, right? Because Kaylin's not here to sort of guide us, right? But it is interesting that in the beginning part of the dream, the partner consciousness is wrong. And at the end of the dream, a part of Kaylin that connects to cleverness, cunning, getting things done in an interesting sort of way, fox mentality, that part of her hasn't been fed. And her partner can't help that. The partner's good food can't satisfy something that the foxes are representing. Therefore, they're unappreciative. She feels sad and used. And I'm so sorry, but somewhere in there is a message that the food she's receiving from her partner, though good food, is ultimately not feeding some clever part of her consciousness. And this, I feel sad and used, is somewhere floating in there about the impact of not feeding her foxes with her own food. And I will have to leave it to Kaylin to figure out what that really means in terms of the day-to-day of the relationship.
Wow.
I think we've modeled something important here, Zoe, which is that like the dream speaks to me. And so I do my thing. You're part of this process in the listening and the receiving of it, right? You're kind of a stand-in for the dreamer and you saw where I was going. And then without Kaylin here to help guide us, I just respond to the themes that the dream have in them and your reflection and help in holding space with me to do so. We land at an interpretation that, if nothing else, I think will be interesting and instructive to our listeners who get something out of hearing where I go with a dream. And then, Kaylin, when you hear this, you can sort of take what works and leave behind what doesn't. Because remember, it's your dream, honey, and you are the owner of what it is and what it means and what you do with it.
Thank you for listening to Conscious Embodiment, Astrology and Dreams with Dr. Michael Lennox. You can find us on Apple Music, the iHeartRadio app, and anywhere you find your favorite shows. Head on over to michaellennox.com for information on astrology readings, the daily Astro Alert subscription, upcoming classes, and to join the mailing list.